In the world of royalty, where every gesture is choreographed and every smile calculated, sometimes the mask slips. What happens when decades of buried resentment explode in front of rolling cameras? When the carefully constructed image of a perfect royal family crumbles in a single devastating moment that the whole world witnesses? This is the story of how one heated exchange between Queen Consort Isabella and Crown Princess Elena changed the monarchy forever. It's about power, jealousy, family secrets, and the price of living under constant scrutiny. Most importantly, it's about how Royal Protection Officer Marcus Thompson made a split-second decision that would define his career and reshape the royal family's future. The cameras were rolling, the world was watching, and nobody was prepared for what happened next. Based on fictional characters and events, the morning of September 15th began like any other at Kensington Palace, with the soft chiming of ancient bells and the quiet rustle of staff preparing for another day in service to the crown. Queen Consort Isabella stood before her ornate mirror, watching her lady-in-waiting fasten a string of pearls around her neck. Each pearl was a reminder of her position, earned through years of careful navigation through the treacherous waters of royal politics. Isabella had married King Edward 23 years ago, becoming stepmother to his daughter Elena, who was then a rebellious 15-year-old still grieving her mother's death. The late Queen Victoria had been beloved by the people, and Isabella knew she could never truly fill those shoes. Instead, she had carved out her own path, becoming the perfect royal consort through sheer determination and calculated charm. "Your Majesty, the car will be ready in 10 minutes, announced her private secretary, James Whitmore, appearing in the doorway with his usual pristine posture. Today's schedule was packed with the annual Children's Hospital Charity Gala, an event that would showcase the royal family's commitment to humanitarian causes. More importantly for Isabella, it was her event, one she had championed for over a decade. Meanwhile, 3 floors below in her own apartments, Crown Princess Elena was having a very different morning. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications from social media, news alerts, and messages from her communications team. At 38, Elena had grown into a formidable royal, balancing her duties as heir to the throne with her role as a mother of 3 young children and advocate for mental health awareness.
"Marcus, have you seen the latest polls?" Elena asked her personal protection officer, Marcus Thompson, as he conducted his routine security sweep of her office.
Marcus had been with the royal family for 8 years, rising through the ranks of the Royal Protection Command through his exceptional skills and unwavering loyalty. "I try to avoid the numbers, Your Royal Highness. They change with the weather," Marcus replied diplomatically, though he had indeed seen them. Elena's approval ratings had been climbing steadily over the past year, while Isabella's had remained stagnant. The press had begun to speculate about Elena's growing influence and what it might mean for the monarchy's future direction. Elena turned her attention to the large manila folder on her desk, labeled Hospital Modernization Initiative. For months she had been working on a comprehensive plan to reform the royal family's charitable work, focusing on evidence-based programs and measurable outcomes rather than traditional ribbon-cutting ceremonies. The Children's Hospital Gala would be the perfect venue to announce her initiative, a surprise that would demonstrate the monarchy's evolution for the modern age. What Elena didn't know was that Isabella had spent the previous evening reviewing the same type of proposal delivered to her by palace advisors concerned about potential conflicts between the Queen Consort and the Crown Princess. The advisors had been walking a tightrope for months, trying to manage the increasingly obvious tension between the two women without openly acknowledging the growing power struggle. Royal Protection Officer Sarah Chen, assigned to Isabella's detail, had noticed the stress lines around the Queen Consort's eyes during their morning briefing. In her 5 years of service, Sarah had learned to read the subtle signs of royal displeasure. Isabella's smile had been particularly bright during breakfast, which paradoxically meant she was deeply troubled about something. The charity gala was set to take place at the Royal Albert Hall, with over 3,000 guests including celebrities, politicians, and major donors. Television crews from around the world had positioned themselves strategically, hoping to capture moments of royal grace and charitable spirit. The event was being broadcast live, with commentary focusing on the royal family's unity and shared commitment to helping vulnerable children.
The stakes and figures were ensured that they would...
As the morning progressed, both women prepared for what they assumed would be another successful royal engagement. Isabella rehearsed her speech in the car, reviewing key statistics about children's health care and the positive impact of royal patronage. She had always prided herself on being thoroughly prepared, a trait that had served her well during her years of establishing credibility as Queen Consort. Elena, traveling in a separate vehicle, was reviewing her surprise announcement with her private secretary,
The Hospital Modernization Initiative represented months of research and consultation with healthcare experts, policymakers, and patient advocates.
She believed it would revolutionize how the royal family approached charitable work, moving beyond symbolic gestures to create real, measurable change. Neither woman was aware that palace staff had been quietly taking sides for weeks. Some believed Elena's modern approach was exactly what the monarchy needed to remain relevant in the 21st century. Others felt that Isabella's traditional methods had proven successful and that Elena's reforms might undermine established relationships with long-standing charitable partners. Marcus Thompson had been briefed about the potential for scheduling conflicts during the gala, palace speak for the diplomatic crisis that had been brewing between Isabella and Elena's teams. As head of Elena's protection detail, he had access to intelligence reports that painted a concerning picture of increasing rivalry within the royal household. The irony was that both women wanted the same thing: to make a meaningful difference in children's lives and to strengthen the monarchy's public image. Their approaches, however, had become incompatible, creating a situation where collaboration seemed impossible despite their shared goals. As their respective motorcades arrived at the Royal Albert Hall, photographers captured beautiful images of both women stepping onto the red carpet. Isabella wore a deep blue ensemble that complemented her sapphire tiara, while Elena chose a modern emerald dress that highlighted her contemporary style. To outside observers, they appeared to be the picture of royal elegance and family harmony. Behind the scenes, however, the careful choreography of royal protocol was about to face its greatest test. Isabella's team had prepared a seating arrangement that would emphasize her role as the evening's primary host, while Elena's staff had made last-minute adjustments that would position her for maximum impact during her surprise announcement. The children's choir was warming up in the back rooms, their innocent voices creating a stark contrast to the adult tensions building in the VIP areas. Hospital administrators mingled with corporate sponsors, all unaware that they were about to witness a moment that would be replayed on news channels around the world for weeks to come. As the guests took their seats and the television cameras began their live broadcast, Marcus Thompson positioned himself with clear sightlines to both royal women. His training had taught him to anticipate threats, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for what was about to unfold between two members of the family he had sworn to protect. The stage was set, the cameras were rolling, and the world was watching as the royal family prepared to demonstrate their commitment to charitable causes. What happened next would change everything. The Royal Albert Hall buzzed with anticipation as guests settled into their seats, the ornate Victorian architecture providing a majestic backdrop for the evening's proceedings. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over the assembled crowd, while television cameras captured every angle of what was supposed to be a celebration of royal charitable work. Isabella took her position at the head table, her posture perfect and her smile practiced. She had hosted this gala for 11 consecutive years, and tonight was meant to be a capstone moment in her charitable legacy. The program listed her as the keynote speaker, with Elena scheduled to offer brief closing remarks. It was a traditional arrangement that had worked well in previous years. Elena entered the hall to warm applause, acknowledging dignitaries and major donors as she made her way to the royal section. Her presence commanded attention not just because of her position as heir to the throne, but because of her natural charisma and genuine connection with people. She had inherited her late mother's gift for making everyone feel personally recognized, even in large gatherings. Marcus Thompson maintained his position near the royal section, his trained eyes scanning the crowd while keeping Elena in his peripheral vision. He had worked enough royal events to recognize the signs of a perfectly orchestrated evening, but something felt different tonight. There was an undercurrent of tension that he couldn't quite identify, a sense that multiple agendas were converging in ways that might not be compatible. The evening began flawlessly. Children from the hospital's pediatric wing performed a heartwarming musical number, their courage and joy bringing genuine tears to many eyes in the audience. Isabella delivered her opening remarks with the polish of someone who had mastered the art of public speaking, highlighting the progress made in children's health care and the royal family's ongoing commitment to supporting medical research. But as the evening progressed, subtle signs of discord began to emerge. When Isabella mentioned her personal involvement in fundraising efforts, the cameras caught Elena's slight frown, a momentary crack in royal composure that would later be analyzed frame by royal watchers. Similarly, when Elena was introduced for her closing remarks, Isabella's applause seemed measured rather than enthusiastic. Elena approached the podium with a folder that hadn't been listed in the official program. Palace protocol typically required all speeches to be reviewed and approved in advance, but Elena's private secretary had submitted only a brief outline, describing her remarks as standard closing comments in gratitude to donors. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elena began,
her voice carrying clearly through the hall's excellent acoustics.
However, I believe we can do more than celebrate past achievements. Tonight, I'm excited to announce a new direction for royal charitable work.
Marcus noticed Isabella's posture stiffen slightly, a subtle but telling sign of surprise. This was clearly not what had been planned, and protocol dictated that major announcements should be coordinated through the Queen Consort's office, especially at events she was hosting.
Elena continued. The Hospital Modernization Initiative will transform how the royal family approaches charitable work. Instead of simply lending our names to worthy causes, we will actively participate in developing evidence-based programs that can demonstrate measurable improvements in patient outcomes. This represents a fundamental shift from traditional patronage to active partnership. The audience responded with enthusiastic applause, particularly from younger attendees and healthcare professionals who had long hoped for exactly this type of modern approach. Television commentators immediately recognized the significance of the announcement, describing it as a potential watershed moment for the monarchy's evolution. Isabella's practiced smile remained fixed, but those who knew her well could see the storm building behind her eyes.
This announcement represented everything she had worked to avoid: a public challenge to her authority, delivered at her own event, without consultation or coordination. Worse, it implied criticism of her traditional methods, suggesting they were outdated and ineffective. As Elena outlined the specifics of her initiative, including partnerships with medical schools and research institutions, Isabella's discomfort became increasingly visible to those sitting nearby. She began fidgeting with her program, a nervous habit that she had worked for years to suppress. Sarah Chen, her protection officer, recognized the signs of mounting distress and discreetly signaled for backup positioning. The initiative Elena described was genuinely impressive, the result of months of careful research and consultation with experts. She spoke passionately about leveraging the royal family's influence to drive real change rather than simply maintaining charitable traditions. Her vision was compelling, modern, and precisely what many royal commentators had been calling for, to ensure the monarchy's continued relevance. But timing and context mattered in royal protocol, and Elena had chosen to make her announcement without consulting the very person who had built the charitable framework she was now proposing to reform. Isabella had spent over 2 decades establishing relationships with charitable organizations, learning their needs, and developing effective fundraising strategies. Elena's announcement, however well-intentioned, felt like a repudiation of everything Isabella had accomplished. Marcus observed the growing tension with professional concern. His training included managing interpersonal conflicts within the royal family, but those scenarios had always involved private discussions rather than public confrontations. The live television broadcast meant that any negative reaction would be captured and analyzed by millions of viewers around the world. Helena concluded her remarks to sustained applause, but as she returned to her seat, Isabella was already rising from hers. Protocol suggested that the evening should end with Elena's announcement, but Isabella clearly felt the need to respond immediately, rather than allowing the moment to pass unchallenged. "Royal Highness speaks with admirable passion," Isabella began, her voice carefully controlled but carrying an edge that hadn't been present during her earlier remarks. "However, charitable work requires more than innovative ideas. It requires patience, relationship building, and respect for the partners who have trusted us with their missions for many years." The hall fell silent as guests recognized that they were witnessing something unprecedented: a public disagreement between senior members of the royal family. Television cameras zoomed in on both women, capturing every nuance of expression as the confrontation unfolded in real time. Elena's response was measured but firm. "Your Majesty, I have tremendous respect for the foundation you've built. My initiative seeks to build upon that foundation, not replace it. However, we must evolve with the times and demonstrate that royal patronage can achieve more than symbolic support." The words were diplomatically chosen, but their implication was clear. Isabella's methods were outdated and insufficient for addressing modern challenges. The audience sat transfixed, unsure whether they should applaud, remain silent, or discreetly begin leaving. Isabella's composure began to crack. Evolution should not mean abandoning proven strategies in favor of untested experiments. The families who rely on our charitable partners cannot afford to have their support systems disrupted by ambitious reforms that may sound impressive but lack practical foundation. Marcus felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that preceded crisis situations. His role as Elena's protector had never included protecting her from members of her own family, but the situation was clearly escalating beyond normal diplomatic tensions. He began calculating response options while hoping that both women would recognize the need to de-escalate before permanent damage was done. Elena's voice took on a sharper edge as she responded. With respect, Your Majesty, maintaining the status quo is not serving these families well enough.
We have the resources and influence to do better, and we should have the courage to try. The word courage hung in the air like an accusation, implying that Isabella's traditional approach reflected timidity rather than wisdom. For someone who had spent decades proving her worthiness as queen consort, fighting for acceptance and respect in a role she had never been born to fill, the suggestion that she lacked courage cut deeply. Isabella's hands began to tremble slightly, a physical manifestation of the emotional storm building inside her. 23 years of careful control, of measured responses and diplomatic solutions were about to give way to something much more dangerous. Honest emotion in front of the entire world. The silence in the Royal Albert Hall was deafening, as 3,000 guests held their collective breath, sensing that they were witnessing something that would be remembered long after the evening's charitable mission was forgotten. Television cameras continued rolling, their operators instinctively knowing they were capturing history in the making. Isabella's facade of perfect composure began to crumble. Her hands, which had remained elegantly still throughout decades of public appearances, now gripped the edge of the table with visible intensity. The carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the flush of anger rising in her cheeks, and her breathing became shallow and quick. Courage? Isabella repeated, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried throughout the acoustically perfect hall.
You speak of courage while undermining the very woman who raised you, who stood by your father's side when he needed support most, who built these charitable relationships one conversation at a time while you were learning your multiplication tables. Elena's composure faltered for the first time, recognizing that the conversation had moved far beyond policy disagreements into deeply personal territory.
Isabella, I never meant to suggest, Your Majesty, Isabella interrupted sharply, her voice rising with each word. The proper address is Your Majesty, not the familiar name you use when we disagree in private. Or have you decided that royal protocol, like charitable tradition, is something to be discarded when it no longer serves your ambitions? Marcus Thompson felt his protective instincts surge as the situation spiraled beyond diplomatic salvage. His training had prepared him for physical threats, terrorist attacks, and crowd control situations, but nothing had equipped him to handle a complete breakdown of royal composure during a live television broadcast. He began moving closer to Elena's position while signaling discreetly to Sarah Chen, Isabella's protection officer. The audience was trapped between fascination and horror.
Many had never seen senior royals express genuine emotion, let alone anger, in public settings. Others recognized that they were witnessing the destruction of carefully maintained illusions about royal family harmony.
Television commentators struggled to provide context while the drama unfolded in real time. Elena attempted to regain control of the situation.
Your Majesty, perhaps we should continue this conversation privately. Our disagreement about charitable strategy doesn't need to overshadow tonight's celebration of the Children's Hospital.
But Isabella was beyond diplomatic solutions. Years of suppressed frustration burst forth like a dam breaking under too much pressure.
Privately, you chose to make this public when you announced your initiative without consultation.
You chose to criticize my methods in front of our charitable partners. You chose to embarrass me at my own event. Her voice cracked on the last words, revealing depths of pain that shocked even Elena.
Isabella had built her entire identity around being the perfect queen consort, earning respect through flawless execution of royal duties. Having her methods publicly questioned by the very person she had helped raise felt like a betrayal that cut to the core of who she was.
I have given everything to this family, Isabella continued, her voice growing stronger and more passionate. I married into grief and suspicion, knowing I could never replace Victoria in the people's hearts, or in your heart. I accepted that limitation and built something different, something valuable, something real. And now you stand there questioning whether I have courage. Elena's eyes filled with tears as she realized the depth of pain her words had caused. Isabella, I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you or minimize everything you've accomplished. Your work has been incredible and I— Stop, Isabella commanded, raising her hand in a gesture that silenced the hall. Stop managing me like a public relations crisis. Stop treating me like an obstacle to your vision of a modern monarchy.
I am not a placeholder keeping your seat warm until you're ready to take over. I am the queen consort of this realm, and I have earned that title through 23 years of service.
The raw emotion in Isabella's voice was unprecedented. Royal family members were trained from birth to suppress personal feelings in favor of institutional dignity, but decades of careful control were evaporating in real time. The woman behind the crown was finally visible, and she was magnificent in her fury. Marcus made a crucial decision,
Recognizing that the situation had moved beyond diplomatic repair and was heading toward permanent damage for both women and the institution they represented, he began moving toward the stage. His protective instincts extended beyond physical safety to encompass the broader welfare of those under his care.
Elena tried once more to de-escalate. Your Majesty, please. Let's step aside and discuss this properly.
We're both passionate about helping children, and I know we can find common ground. Isabella laughed bitterly.
Common ground?
You've announced a complete restructuring of charitable work without consultation, implied that my methods are outdated and cowardly, and now you want to find common ground? The ground we're standing on right now is mine.
This event, these relationships, this work, I built it all while you were learning to be a princess. The cruelty in Isabella's voice surprised everyone, including herself.
She had never spoken to Elena with such venom, had always maintained the role of supportive stepmother despite their growing political differences. But years of feeling undervalued and overshadowed had created a reservoir of resentment that was now overflowing publicly.
Elena's composure finally broke completely. Tears streamed down her face as she responded with her own suppressed emotions.
You think this is easy for me? You think I wanted to challenge you?
I've spent years walking on eggshells, trying not to outshine you, trying to respect your position while also preparing for my own future responsibilities. I announced that initiative because I believed it was right, not because I wanted to hurt you. The vulnerability in Elena's voice revealed another layer of the royal family's hidden dynamics. Both women had been struggling with their roles, feeling constrained by expectations and protocols that often put them at odds despite their shared goals.
Isabella's anger reached its peak. Trying not to outshine me?
Every poll, every article, every public appearance reinforces how much more beloved you are. The people tolerate me because they love you and your father.
Don't pretend you've been holding back out of consideration for my feelings. She stepped closer to Elena, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried throughout the hall. You want to know about courage? Try being brave enough to acknowledge that some traditions exist because they work, not because they're convenient.
Try being brave enough to build something instead of just inheriting it and deciding it's not good enough. The personal attack struck Elena like a physical blow. As the future queen, she had always known that her position was inherited rather than earned, but having that privilege thrown in her face publicly was devastating. Her response came from a place of deep hurt rather than political calculation.
At least I'm not so terrified of being forgotten that I have to sabotage anyone who might accomplish something meaningful. Elena shot back, her voice shaking with emotion. At least I'm not so insecure that I view every new idea as a personal threat to my legacy. The words hung in the air like an explosion. Isabella's face went white, then red, as the accusation of insecurity hit its target. In that moment, both women had moved far beyond royal protocol, into territory where forgiveness would be difficult and forgetting impossible.
Marcus reached the edge of the stage as Isabella took a step toward Elena, her body language suggesting that the confrontation might become physical. 23 years of suppressed emotion had nowhere left to go, and Elena's final words had pushed Isabella beyond the boundaries of royal composure, into something much more dangerous.
Time seemed to slow as Marcus Thompson watched Isabella take that fateful step toward Elena. In his 8 years protecting the royal family, he had never faced a situation where one member of the family posed a potential threat to another.
His training kicked in automatically, but the protocols for this scenario were uncharted territory. Isabella's face had transformed completely. The careful makeup and practiced expressions were gone, replaced by raw fury that made her unrecognizable as the composed queen consort the world knew. Her hands were clenched into fists, her entire body radiating the kind of anger that comes from years of suppressed resentment finally finding its release.
Insecure?
Isabella's voice was barely human now, more of a growl than speech.
You privileged, entitled child.
You have no idea what insecurity means. You've never had to earn respect, never had to prove you belong, never had to watch people count the days until you're replaced by someone they actually want.
Elena backed away instinctively, suddenly recognizing that her stepmother was beyond rational discourse. The woman approaching her was someone she had never seen before, someone whose careful control had finally snapped under too much pressure.
Fear replaced anger in Elena's eyes as she realized that the situation had become genuinely dangerous. I gave up my entire life for this family, Isabella continued, advancing with each word. My career, my friends, my identity, everything sacrificed to become what you needed me to become. And now you stand there questioning my courage, my methods, my worth? Marcus made his move. With the fluid grace of someone trained in close protection, he stepped between the two women just as Isabella reached toward Elena. His positioning was perfect, close enough to intercede without appearing aggressive, angled to protect Elena while not directly confronting Isabella in a way that might escalate the situation further. "Your Majesty," Marcus said quietly, his voice calm but firm, "perhaps we should step back and take a moment to breathe." Isabella's fury turned toward him instantly. "Get out of my way."
"This doesn't concern you." "I'm afraid it does, Your Majesty," Marcus replied, maintaining his position.
My job is to protect the crown princess, and right now that includes protecting her from this situation. The implication was clear. Marcus viewed Isabella as a threat that Elena needed protection from. The insult struck Isabella like a physical blow, causing her to step back as if she had been slapped. The realization that her own family's protection officer saw her as dangerous was perhaps more devastating than anything Elena had said. Sarah Chen, Isabella's protection officer, faced an impossible choice. Her primary duty was to protect Isabella, but the queen consort was clearly the aggressor in this confrontation. Moving to support Marcus would feel like betraying her principal, but allowing the situation to continue could result in physical violence that would destroy both women and the monarchy itself. The television cameras captured every moment of the unprecedented scene. Royal protection officers intervening in family disputes was unheard of, and Marcus's action would be analyzed and debated for years to come. Was he overstepping his authority by interfering in a domestic disagreement? Or was he fulfilling his duty by recognizing that the situation had moved beyond normal family tensions? Elena found her voice behind Marcus's protective presence. "This has gone too far. We're both saying things we don't mean." But Isabella was beyond placation. Seeing Marcus shield Elena from her felt like the final confirmation of everything she had feared about her position in the family. She was the outsider, the threat to be managed, the problem to be contained. Even Elena's protection officer understood the family dynamics better than she had wanted to admit. "Don't mean," Isabella laughed harshly. "Every word I've said tonight is true. You are entitled. You are privileged. And you are ungrateful for everything I've done to prepare you for the role you were born to inherit." She turned her attention to Marcus, her voice dripping with accumulated bitterness. "And you, Officer Thompson, have just made your loyalties very clear. When you write your report about tonight, make sure you mention that you chose to protect the future queen from the current queen consort. I'm sure that will make for interesting reading at your performance review." Marcus felt the weight of the impossible situation he was navigating. His protective instincts had driven him to shield Elena from what appeared to be an imminent physical threat, but in doing so, he had publicly chosen sides in a royal family conflict. There would be consequences for his career, but in that moment, protecting Elena felt more important than protecting his own future. The audience remained frozen, unsure whether they were witnessing a temporary breakdown that would be smoothed over with royal diplomacy, or a permanent fracture in the monarchy's carefully maintained image. Many guests began reaching for their phones, knowing that they were witnessing history but uncertain whether documenting it would be appropriate. Isabella suddenly seemed to recognize the magnitude of what was happening. The reality of her loss of control, played out in front of 3,000 witnesses and broadcast live around the world, hit her like a cold wave.
She was a doctor, her good father.
The composed, dignified woman who had spent decades earning respect through flawless public behavior was gone, replaced by someone she didn't recognize and couldn't control. "Look at what you've done," she whispered, her voice now breaking with despair rather than anger.
"Look at what you've made me become." Elena stepped around Marcus's protective presence, ignoring his subtle attempt to maintain the barrier between them. "Isabella, no, this isn't anyone's fault. We're both under tremendous pressure, and we've both said things we regret."
But Isabella was already backing away, her face crumpling as the full implications of her public breakdown became clear. The career she had built through careful dignity was destroyed. The respect she had earned through decades of service was gone. The image of royal composure that she had maintained through every challenge was shattered beyond repair. "I can never come back from this," Isabella said, more to herself than to Elena or the watching crowd. 23 years of work, destroyed in 23 minutes. Marcus recognized a new kind of crisis developing. Isabella's despair was potentially more dangerous than her anger had been, suggesting a psychological breakdown that might require immediate intervention. His role as a protection officer extended beyond physical threats, to encompass any situation that might endanger the royal family's welfare. Elena reached toward her stepmother with genuine compassion. "Isabella, We can fix this. We can work together to address what happened here tonight. The people will understand that we're human, that we have disagreements like any family. Isabella pulled away from Elena's offered comfort. The people will understand that their queen consort lost control and attacked their beloved princess in front of the world. They'll understand that I'm exactly what my critics always said I was, an outsider who never really belonged in this family. The pain in Isabella's voice was raw and devastating. All the confidence and authority that had carried her through decades of public service had evaporated, leaving behind someone who looked small and lost despite her royal jewels and formal gown. Sarah Chen made her decision, stepping forward to offer support to Isabella, while carefully avoiding any action that might suggest she was taking sides in the conflict. Your Majesty, perhaps we should retire for the evening and address this situation privately. Isabella laughed bitterly at the suggestion. Privately? There's no such thing as private anymore. This moment will be replayed on every news channel, analyzed by every royal correspondent, and remembered forever as the night the queen consort revealed her true nature. The truth of that statement settled over everyone present. In an age of social media and instant global communication, there would be no containing the damage from this confrontation. The careful image management that had protected the royal family for generations was powerless against the reality of live television and smartphone cameras. Marcus maintained his protective stance, knowing that his intervention had fundamentally changed his relationship with both women and possibly ended his career in royal protection. But as he watched Isabella's complete emotional collapse and Elena's desperate attempts to offer comfort, he knew that his split-second decision had been necessary to prevent even greater tragedy. The question now was whether anyone could salvage something positive from the wreckage of what had been intended as a celebration of charitable service to children. The gala's original purpose seemed almost forgotten in the aftermath of the royal family's very public implosion, but somehow the mission of helping vulnerable children felt more urgent than ever. The silence that followed Isabella's admission of defeat was more deafening than her earlier outburst. 3,000 guests sat in stunned quiet, processing what they had witnessed while television cameras continued their relentless documentation of the royal family's most vulnerable moment. The ornate beauty of the Royal Albert Hall seemed to mock the ugliness of what had just unfolded within its walls. Elena stood motionless, tears streaming down her face as she watched her stepmother collapse emotionally before the entire world. The woman who had raised her, who had taught her royal protocol and helped her navigate the complexities of public service, was now broken and humiliated in a way that could never be undone. The guilt was overwhelming, even though both women had contributed to the disaster. Marcus Thompson remained between them, his protective stance unchanged but his mind racing through the implications of what had occurred. His intervention had potentially saved the situation from becoming physically violent, but it had also created a permanent record of his choosing Elena's welfare over Isabella's dignity. The ramifications for his career were secondary to his immediate concerns about both women's emotional states. Isabella slowly straightened her posture, drawing on reserves of royal training that operated even in moments of complete breakdown. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice hoarse but carrying clearly through the hall's perfect acoustics, "I apologize for subjecting you to a family disagreement that should have remained private. Your generous support of children's healthcare deserves better than what you've witnessed tonight." The words were appropriate and dignified, but they couldn't erase what had happened. Isabella's careful composure was restored only on the surface. Underneath, everyone could see the devastation that would follow her for the rest of her public life. She had become human in the worst possible way, at the worst possible time, in front of the worst possible audience. Elena found her voice, stepping closer to Isabella despite Marcus's subtle attempt to maintain the protective barrier. "Your Majesty, please don't shoulder all the responsibility. I contributed to this situation with my poor timing and insensitive words. We both lost sight of what really matters tonight. The gesture was generous, but it came too late to change the narrative that would dominate headlines around the world. The story would be about Isabella's loss of control, Marcus's intervention, and the apparent fragility of royal family relationships that the public had assumed were stable and harmonious. Dr. Margaret Hendricks, the hospital's chief administrator, made a brave decision to step forward and address the audience. As someone who had worked with both women extensively and genuinely cared about their charitable mission, she felt compelled to try salvaging something positive from the evening's wreckage. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent decades managing medical crises, "what we've witnessed tonight is actually a perfect example of why your charitable work matters so much. Families face difficult moments. Disagreements happen and people sometimes say things they regret. But healing is possible when people care about each other and commit to working through their problems." Her words created a bridge that both women could cross without losing additional dignity.
Isabella nodded gratefully, while Elena seized the opportunity to redirect attention toward their shared mission rather than their personal conflict. Doctor consists.
Hendricks is right, Elena said, addressing the audience directly. The hospital modernization initiative I announced tonight was inspired by conversations with healthcare providers like her who see every day how much more we could accomplish if we work together effectively. Tonight has been a reminder that collaboration requires patience, communication, and mutual respect, qualities I failed to demonstrate adequately.
Isabella took a deep breath and made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. The Crown Princess's initiative has merit, she said, her voice steady despite the emotional storm she had weathered.
My concerns about implementation and coordination remain valid, but perhaps those concerns could be addressed through partnership rather than opposition. The olive branch was unexpected and genuine, representing Isabella's attempt to transform personal disaster into institutional healing.
Marcus relaxed slightly, recognizing that both women were working to de-escalate rather than continue their confrontation.
Marcus made his own decision in that moment, stepping back but remaining alert.
His protective posture had served its purpose, but maintaining it would only reinforce the narrative of division and threat. Elena and Isabella needed space to rebuild their relationship, and his role was to facilitate that healing rather than perpetuate the barrier between them.
Sarah Chen approached Isabella carefully, offering quiet support without drawing additional attention to her principal's distress. The coordination between protection officers reflected their shared commitment to minimizing further damage while ensuring both women's safety and dignity. Sarah Chen approached Isabella carefully.
Elena extended her hand toward Isabella, a gesture that was simultaneously personal and symbolic. Would you be willing to work with me on developing an approach that honors your experience while incorporating new strategies? I genuinely need your guidance to make this successful. Isabella hesitated for a moment before accepting Elena's hand, recognizing that the gesture would be photographed and analyzed endlessly, but feeling that healing was more important than perfect image management.
I think we both have things to learn from each other, she replied, her voice gaining strength with each word. The audience began to applaud, tentatively at first, but growing stronger as people recognized they were witnessing an attempt at reconciliation rather than continued conflict. The children's choir, who had been waiting in the wings throughout the confrontation, began singing softly. A spontaneous decision by their director that provided a beautiful soundtrack for the healing moment. Television commentators struggled to provide context for what they were witnessing. The evening had progressed from routine charity gala to royal confrontation to attempted reconciliation in ways that defied easy categorization. The human drama had overshadowed the institutional implications, but both elements would be analyzed for years to come. Marcus knew that his career in royal protection was likely over, regardless of how the evening concluded. His intervention had been necessary and appropriate, but it had also established him as someone who would take sides in family conflicts rather than maintaining neutral protection. Elena would need a new security team, and Isabella would never trust him again. But as he watched both women work to rebuild their relationship in front of 3,000 witnesses, Marcus felt that his sacrifice had been worthwhile. Sometimes protecting people meant more than preventing physical harm. Sometimes it meant creating space for healing and growth, even at personal cost. The gala concluded with both women speaking together about their shared commitment to children's welfare, their different approaches becoming complementary rather than competitive. Isabella's traditional relationship building would provide the foundation for Elena's innovative programs, while Elena's modern methods would expand the impact of Isabella's established networks. The damage from their confrontation would never be completely erased. Videos of the argument would be replayed endlessly, analyzed by experts, and remembered as a pivotal moment in royal history. But something valuable had emerged from the wreckage. Two strong women learning to work together despite their differences, and a reminder that even the most carefully managed institutions are ultimately run by human beings with human flaws. As guests filed out of the Royal Albert Hall, many felt they had witnessed something unprecedented and important. Not just the breakdown of royal composure, but its reconstruction into something more honest and potentially more effective. The monarchy's image of perfection was damaged, but its humanity was revealed in ways that might ultimately prove more valuable. Marcus Thompson remained on duty until both women were safely returned to their respective residences, but he knew his time as a royal protection officer was ending. His split-second decision to shield Elena had changed everything, but as he reviewed the evening's events, he couldn't imagine choosing differently. Some moments define careers, and some careers are worth defining through single moments of moral clarity. The children who would benefit from the royal family's charitable work would never know how close the entire system came to complete collapse that evening, or how the intervention of one protection officer helped preserve their future advocates. But in the quiet hours after the storm, as London slept and the world processed what it had witnessed, the foundation for something better was already being built from the rubble of what had been destroyed. Caught on camera, Camilla loses control. Guard shields Catherine.